From the desk of Miss Brandt. Dear class, now that we have learned about some famous scientists, I am so eager to read your reports and find out who was your favorite. Did your scientist find out something new? Something that nobody had known about? How did your scientist make his or her discovery? Often, scientists make discoveries by doing experiments. Did you do an experiment for your report? If you did, what did you discover? Have fun doing your report. Miss Brandt. George Washington Carver, The Peanut Wizard, by Laura Driscoll, illustrated by Jill Weber. I'm nuts about peanuts and peanut butter. If I could, I would eat peanut butter for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But 150 years ago, people didn't like to eat peanuts very much. They were mostly used to feed animals.
Can I eat a peanut?
Now, why would you want to?
Then along came a scientist named George Washington Carver. My mom and I saw a TV show about him. His nickname was the Peanut Wizard. Once I heard that, I had to find out more about him. He showed the world that peanuts were yummy and could be used in lots of recipes. He also showed how peanuts could be made into many useful things. Guess which one of these things is not made from peanuts? Here is George Washington Carver holding a peanut plant. Now, the average American eats more than 6 pounds of peanuts and peanut butter every year. I guess I'm not the average American, because I bet I eat way more than that. November is Peanut Butter Lovers Month, and guess what? My birthday is November the 12th. Good. Here is me eating peanut butter, the best stuff on earth. A sad beginning. This is the Carver farm where George grew up. It's in Diamond Grove, Missouri. I'd like to go there someday. George Washington Carver did not start out as a famous scientist. He started out as just George. He was born around 1864 on a farm in Missouri that was owned by Susan and Moses Carver. George was a slave. That meant he was owned by the Carvers. So were his mother and his older brother, Jim. It makes me sad and mad to think there was a time in America where people could own other people. And that's George's mother, George, and Jim. It makes me even sadder what happened to George's mother. Slave robbers took her. These were men who kidnapped slaves so they could sell them to somebody else. George and Jim never saw their mother again. Even though the Carvers had owned slaves, they sound like pretty nice people. They raised George and his brother, and they treated them like they were their sons. George was smaller and got sick a lot, so he helped Susan Carver with the housework and in the garden. Slavery ended in 1865. When George was still a baby. The plant doctor. What George liked best was working in Susan's garden. He wanted to know all about different plants. He was very curious. That is something a good scientist needs to be. I don't know what plants George grew in his garden. I cut out pictures of plants and flowers that we grow in ours. George also had a secret plant hospital in the woods. He took sick plants there and tried to make them better. People started calling him the plant doctor. The plant artist. George liked to draw plants too. He'd look very carefully at the shape of the leaves and the flowers. Like you told us in class, Mrs. Brandt, scientists learn by looking. With paints that he made from berry juice, George also painted flowers on rocks. Here is my drawing of a daisy plant. George knew that plants needed sunlight and water, but each plant seemed a little different. Some needed lots of water. Others needed much less. Some plants grew better in bright sun. Others grew better with more shade. And there's a drawing of how a plant grows. Lots of questions. There were some plants that George couldn't figure out. He wondered why some plants died, even if they got plenty of light and water.
What am I doing wrong?
Here are two of our house plants. This one just grows and grows. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with this poor plant. As George got older, he had more and more questions about the world. But Susan and Moses Carver couldn't answer all George's questions. George needed to go to school. However, because he was black, George couldn't go to the school near his home. It was for white kids only. The school for black children was 8 miles away. So do you know what George did? He packed up and went to the new town, all by himself. He was only about 12.
Bye. Bye, George.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
The new kid in class.
This is George.
Hi, everybody.
Although George learned a lot at the school, the teacher could not answer all his questions about nature. So when George heard about a better black school in another town, off he went. George moved many times. He went to lots of black schools in lots of towns. In some towns, he found families to live with, or he found a job and lived on his own. He did jobs like cooking, washing clothes, ironing, and pitching hay. He did all that just so he could go to school and learn. Here are my jobs: make bed, walk the dog, take out the trash, clear the table. George gets the dirt on dirt. When George was about 30 years old, he started college. It was his big dream. Now he could find answers to his questions about plants.
So, George, how's college? What are you studying? I'm learning a lot about dirt. Oh.
He learned about soil and how important it is, since a plant gets its food from the soil. He learned that some kinds of soils have more vitamins or nutrients. By the time George finished school, the teachers thought he knew more about plants than they did. They asked him to stay and work there, and he did. We have a compost heap. We put in eggshells, food scraps, even rabbit doo-doo, along with some dirt. After a while, everything breaks down and the dirt becomes fertilizer. We use it in our garden. Work, work, work. Then one day, George got a letter from a man named Booker T. Washington. He was the head of a new black college in Alabama called Tuskegee Institute. Booker T. Washington wanted George Washington Carver to teach everything he knew about plants, not just to students, but to farmers too. So George said yes.
I'm coming.
If he taught farmers how to grow better crops, they could make more money. When George Washington Carver arrived at Tuskegee Institute, he got a surprise. There were hardly any buildings.
So, where's the rest of the school? It's going to be over there.
Besides teaching school, George needed to help build the school. The farmer's friend. At Tuskegee, farmers came and told Dr. Carver they needed help. All they grew on their farms was cotton.
What do you grow on your farm?
Cotton.
Me too.
Me 3. Same here. Nothing but cotton.
But each year, the cotton crop was worse than the year before. The plant doctor knew why. Planting nothing but cotton was taking too much good stuff, like nitrogen, out of the soil. It was as if the soil had no vitamins left in it. School on wheels. Some farmers couldn't come to Tuskegee to hear George Washington Carver. So on weekends, Dr. Carver took the school to them. He built a special wagon. He loaded it with sweet potatoes and peanuts and black-eyed peas. Then he drove around to the farms.
Oh, school's about to start.
Dr. Carver told the farmers to grow different things like sweet potatoes and peanuts. Why? Because these crops put nitrogen back in the soil. Once there was enough nitrogen in the soil, the farmers could grow cotton again. Good cotton. This idea is called crop rotation. If you plant a different crop each year, the soil gets healthier.
I think I'll give this crop rotation thing a try. Wow, this cotton is huge!
Nuts and spuds. The farmers listened to Dr. Carver. They grew lots of peanuts and sweet potatoes, but then they had trouble selling them. People didn't want them as much as they wanted cotton.
They're good. And good for you too. Thanks, but no thanks.
What would the farmers do now? Dr. Carver wasn't discouraged. He did some work in his lab. He started thinking up new ways to use the sweet potato. Then he did the same thing for the peanut. Do you know what he made? All the things on this page and hundreds more. And there's a picture of George Washington Carver working in his lab. The peanut feast. But Dr. Carver still had to convince people that foods made from peanuts were yummy. He came up with a great idea. One day, he invited businessmen over for lunch. He and his students served them a big, fancy meal. The businessmen loved it.
Eat up, gentlemen. Everything's delicious. Best chicken I ever ate. Thirds, please.
After dessert, Dr. Carver had a surprise for his guests. Everything on the menu was made from peanuts. I wish I'd been there. Now the businessmen were convinced peanut growing could be a big business. George Washington Carver became famous. Newspapers wrote stories about him, but he kept on teaching at Tuskegee for 47 years. And that is where he is buried. Here is Dr. Carver with President Franklin Roosevelt. George Washington Carver could have become rich, but he wanted people to use what he discovered for free so they could make their lives better. On his gravestone it says, "He could have added fortune to fame, but caring for neither, he found happiness and honor in being helpful to the world." That sounds about right to me. And here's a stamp with George's picture. Some nutty facts. The world's largest peanut is 4 inches long. Astronaut Alan B. Shepard Jr. brought a peanut with him to the moon. In the United States, creamy peanut butter sells better on the East Coast, and crunchy peanut butter sells better on the West Coast. The average kid in America will eat 1,500 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches before graduating from high school. I think I've eaten that many already. It takes about 540 peanuts to make a 12-ounce jar of peanut butter.